this is where it all started for me. Forza Motorsport 3 was the very first Forza Motorsport game that I've ever played, and just to give you a little bit of context, just so you know where I'm coming from, I came from the GameCube era. I mean, I had the NES, I had the Super Nintendo, I had the Nintendo 64, the PlayStation 1, and from this point on, I spent about 5 years without having a video game console at all. So my only source of entertainment when it comes to gaming was a PC and a copy of Need for Speed Underground 2, which I played extensively for 5 years straight. And needless to say, I skipped over the PlayStation 2 era entirely, so I haven't played any of those games at all. And then I got married, and my wife gave me as a gift the Xbox 360, and a couple months later she gave me the Forza Motorsport 3, and it was such a different thing for me. It had such a huge impact in me as a gamer that it feels very nostalgic to just boot up this game and see these images popping up on the TV again. I played this game so much back then, and I have so much love for this game because this is a game that kind of grew my passion for racing games even further. And before Forza Motorsport came along, or better yet, before I actually got to play Forza Motorsport, I was a huge fan of Ridge Racer and also Gran Turismo. I was kind of more into Ridge Racer than Gran Turismo because I don't know. I think I'm more of an arcade racer at heart if I stop to analyze the type of games that I have the most fun with. And to me, Gran Turismo was my standard for simulation racing games. And before some of the younger audience comes commenting that today we have Project Cars, Assetto Corsa, and Gran Turismo is not a simulation game, I get that, but you need to understand that for older people like me, people in their 30s, there wasn't anything like Gran Turismo back then. That was the only game that kind of resembled a simulation racing game. And I use that term loosely because I know that even back then it wasn't a simulation at all. It was just the most advanced simulation handling that we had in a console game back then. And when I made the jump to the Xbox 360, skipping over the PS2 era entirely, it was so... The handling in Forza Motorsport 3 kind of stood out to me immediately. I had never driven anything like that in a console racing game, and at first I found it a little bit weird because I wasn't used to that type of handling where you got to feel how heavy the cars were, where you get to drive cars that are a little bit more nuanced than others. Then you would have cars that were a little bit easier to drive, and that's, I think, the thing that stood out the most. And even though all of the cars in Forza Motorsport 3 had all these different characteristics to distinguish the cars, the handling itself felt buttery smooth, and that's the thing that I most loved immediately about Forza Motorsport 3. At first I didn't understand exactly how to drive because I was so ignorant back then that I didn't know that the right and left trigger on the Xbox 360 were pressure sensitive. That's just to show you how long I didn't play any games at all. And it wasn't until a couple months later when a friend came over and told me that the right and left trigger were actually pressure sensitive that something clicked, and I thought, oh my god, I'm so stupid, because all this time I've been playing kind of putting pressing the right trigger all the way down and making the car slide so bad, and I didn't even realize that the button was pressure sensitive. So it was really weird for me at first, but needless, even finding it this weird, I still felt that that it was a really good handling model. And even though I felt that the handling, not the handling itself, but the whole acceleration and braking thing felt a bit weird to my hands because I was ignorant, I still felt that the handling felt really great, felt really buttery smooth, and that's something that I really appreciate about the game back then. And I understand that for some of you who came from the PS2 era, this probably wasn't such a big deal as it was for me, but it was a big deal for me. It felt really special. It felt really different from anything that I have that I've driven before, Forza Motorsport. And I played the game a lot. I can even begin to describe how many hours I put into this game over the course of many years, and I was still playing this game a couple years ago, not so long ago, so that only goes to show how much I love this game. And in general, Forza Motorsport 3 is my favorite game in the franchise, and I still think that there are better, more well-rounded Forza Motorsport games that came after this one. But this game has a special place in my heart, and I can't deny that this is something that really changed everything for me as a gamer. Now, another thing that I really loved about this game right off the bat, right as soon as I started playing the very first race, was the graphics. And I was so used to playing Need for Speed Underground 2 for so long. 5 years, a long time for you to spend playing just one game, at least back then. Back then we didn't have online games to the extent that we have today, where you get constant updates that keep adding stuff to keep you hooked up into the game. And back then, 5 years for you to spend in a game was a lot, and I did that so effortlessly that I didn't even feel the time pass by when I played the game. And the graphics were so amazing when I compared them to Need for Speed Underground 2, that I felt like I was finally being part of a new generation in a console game after so long away from console gaming. So man, everything about this game was there was always something about this game to love. The tracks were so awesome. Maple Valley, it was one of my absolute favorite tracks in the game. I love the car, the way that the cars looked, the way that the cars felt, how big the cars were on the screen. And I loved how the handling felt. I love the sound, even though I don't usually care about sound. You have to understand that when you spend this long away from console gaming and you come back and you hear something sounding so amazing, it's a little bit of a shock. It's not something that you would expect to get from your first boot up. So it was such a nice thing to have that man, I really spent a long time playing this game. But my interest in Forza Motorsport 3 came when I first read an article on a website. I don't recall exactly what website that was. I think it was GameSpot, if I'm not mistaken. There was an interview with Dan Greenawald where he was talking about the game. And at that time, I had no idea what Forza Motorsport was all about. I had never heard about the game before, but something caught my eye. I can't put my finger on it. I have no idea of what was so special about the game that kind of made me have an interest in it. But I remember that a couple months later, there was one of the many interviews that Dan Greenawald gave leading up to the release of the game, and a couple months later the game finally came out, and there was a demo on Xbox Live, and I downloaded it, and I couldn't shut up about it. My wife heard me talk about the game a lot, so much so that she decided to give me the game as a gift. A couple weeks later. I really look back at that time with a lot of nostalgic feeling, because that's where my passion for racing games grew to a whole nother level. Before then, I did love, as I said many times before in many of my videos, I've been playing racing games for approximately, I think, 23 years in total. And I'm 31, so I started really early. And up until that point, I was a big racing fan, not in the sense that I knew that I was a fan, it was just that I was naturally more driven towards racing game without even realizing it. I played mostly racing games in general growing up. And when I started playing Forza Motorsport, it took my passion for racing games to a whole nother level, in the sense that that was the very first time where I felt compelled to learn the tracks, to learn the cars. Before then, I just didn't care about learning braking points. I just didn't care about learning how to drive properly. I just had fun. That wasn't something that was on my mind when I played games back then. But Forza Motorsport changed it, and from Forza Motorsport 3, I started kind of paying attention to how different some of the cars felt, to how I was able to take corners faster, to nailing my braking points, even though I've always had the racing line on. In some cases, I learned to ignore the racing line in order to take the fastest line as possible. I try to learn to race properly, that's what I'm trying to say. And even when I played Gran Turismo, you can call me a noob, I don't care, but even when I played Gran Turismo before Forza Motorsport came along in my life, I kind of had this thing where I didn't care about learning braking points, learning my way around the track. And Forza Motorsport changed that, and I still carry this habit with me today. So that's something that really changed my gaming life in a very positive way. And another thing that I really loved about the game is the tuning system. And I understand that there were a lot of racing games in the PlayStation 2 era that had tuning systems. Even Gran Turismo, if I'm not mistaken, the older ones, they had some sort of tuning system, in the sense that you could buy upgrades to tune your car, but not to the extent that Forza Motorsport did. Forza Motorsport pretty much allowed you to tweak every single aspect of your car, and I won't say that that was the very first game that did that, because I'm pretty sure it wasn't, but it was such a nice thing to have for me, even though I never understood, and to this day I still don't understand how to tune cars. It was nice that you could actually do that if you understood what you were doing with the car. I also loved the fact that you could create liveries for your cars, even though I had never spent any time doing that. I loved watching videos of people doing that on the internet, and I always looked at those videos and wondered to myself, like, how do these guys manage to post something like this off in a game? There was some really cool art going on the internet back then, and there were so many things. As I said at the beginning of this video, there were so many things in this game to love that I'm pretty sure that I'm missing some of the stuff that kind of got me really hooked onto this game. And from this moment on, my passion for racing games took to another level, and then I started playing racing games almost exclusively. And my passion for Forza Motorsport still exists today. Forza Motorsport is still my favorite racing game of all time. I still play a lot. These days I'm kind of more into Forza Horizon than Forza Motorsport, if I'm honest, because Forza Horizon kind of hit the sweet spot that I think it's perfect. It kind of had the same handling characteristics that you find in a Forza Motorsport game, but it feels a little bit more arcadey. It has an open world, a beautiful open world for you to explore, for you to do races around. It has a lot of cars. Even though I'm not a quantity guy, I can definitely appreciate the amount of cars that the game has, because it gives you a lot of options, almost nearly endless options for you to race. it has some of the best soundtracks in any racing game. And before Forza Horizon came along, my favorite soundtrack in a racing game was Ridge Racer Type 4. And I still kind of think that that's one of the best soundtracks in a racing game to this day, but Forza Horizon kind of matched that, and I think it kind of topped it a little bit. And I don't know, man, there was so much stuff in this game, and it was sad. It is a sad time for me, because one of the reasons why I'm revisiting this game is that I'm moving out of Japan. I haven't said anything about that on the channel yet, but I'm leaving Japan pretty soon, and I do intend on uploading an update on that, because that's gonna affect the channel a little bit. I still don't know if that's gonna affect it positively or negatively, but it's gonna affect the channel a little bit, at least at first. So I'm moving out of Japan really soon, and I spent the last 7 years here in Japan, so that's a really long time for you to spend abroad. I'm Brazilian, born and raised, and I'm going back to Brazil in just about a week. And I'm revisiting this game and a lot of other Xbox 360 games, because the Xbox 360 has that awful region lock that I hate. I really hate when gaming consoles have region lock. And unfortunately, not only I won't be able to use my games in a Brazilian Xbox 360, but I also can take my Xbox 360 with me because of different voltages. So I'm gonna have to sell my Xbox 360, but I'm gonna keep my Japanese games because they feel special to me. And even though I'll probably never get a chance to ever play them again, unless I buy them again in Brazil, which is I think it's gonna be something really hard for me to do, because it's gonna be difficult for me to find these games in Brazil again. But it's like my way of saying goodbye to these games that I loved so much and that I played for so long, and that changed me as a gamer forever. And I can only be thankful for Turn 10 Studios for doing something so amazing in a racing game, for changing everything for me, and for changing my perception of what I felt that a racing game should be back then, and something that I still carry with me today. And I would assume that a lot of these games from that era probably had an impact on a lot of people growing up, especially if you are the same age as I am. But I'm kind of curious to see which games kind of had the most impact on you growing up. And I'm not talking about recent games, because there were some recent games for me that kind of did the same, like Drive Club. It's not an old game in any way, shape or form, but that's a game that I can tell that left its mark on me, and that's gonna change a lot of things for me moving forward. But I'm more interested in knowing what kind of games changed everything for you growing up, in your teens or in your childhood. Let me know in the comments down below. Name the game that changed everything for you, and name the reason why it did so. I'm really curious, and I find it really interesting to read this type of comments. I always get curious about what you guys are into and what kind of stuff that you grew up with. Let me know in the comments down below. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I'm gonna be bringing a couple more videos, nostalgic videos like this, because I'm revisiting some of my old Xbox 360 games. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye.